All right, we're going to look at the presidency. So let's look at some of the jobs within that by first looking at the United Kingdom. Okay, so the United Kingdom separates, all right, their executive, and we have something called a head of state there and a head of government. So the head of state in the UK performs ceremonial duties, right? Queen Elizabeth. The head of government is in charge of policymaking and authority. We in the United States took those and merged them together. Okay. And so let's look at the Federalist Number 70. All right. So remember, this is Hamilton. And he provides his rationale for a single executive in this paper. All right. Citing that they should be energetic and forceful. All right. This is good for the government. And that the president is accountable to the people. Right. So should not just sit there and be in office forever, but needs to be accountable in some way. So remember, Fed 70. All right. Hamilton. So the constitutional requirements that we came up with is that you must be 35 years old. Okay. You must have resided in the U.S. for 14 years. That's not talking about immigration or anything like that. You do have to be a U.S.-born citizen. You have to have lived in the United States for 14 years. Okay, and a citizen. All right, so elections. President serves a 4-year term. That is clearly in the Constitution. We did amend the Constitution, all right, for the 22nd Amendment, which limits the president to 2 terms. Okay, remember we had that guy, FDR, who served into his 4th term before dying. So we do pass this amendment to thereby limit and say no more than 2 terms. Thank you very much. All right, let's look at the constitutional powers. We have national security, right? They're the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. They negotiate treaties with other nations. All right, they appoint ambassadors. Remember, ambassadors need to be confirmed by the Senate. Okay. All right, they also have legislative powers. They can veto bills, right? They can say, nope, don't agree with it, don't like it, not passing it. Okay. They can do a pocket veto, right? Kind of stick it in a drawer. All right. There's a couple different ways that can go depending on Congress's terms and how much longer they're in legislation before they go to recess. So that's pretty pivotal. So be sure you read that. They also perform a State of the Union, right? Every January they come out, they yammer on about the State of the Union. They talk about their hopes, what they hope Congress will do, what they hope the direction will be. All right. So administrative nominations. The idea is, right, they nominate all of these cabinet secretaries. Okay. And then the Senate has to confirm all of these appointments. Okay. So pretty important to remember that. Then we're going to have judicial nominations, right? They get to nominate all federal judges, and we have a lot of federal judges. Okay. And then the Senate confirms all judicial appointments, including the Supreme Court, right? There's also some informal powers, right? So things that have evolved over time. They're not enumerated and directly stated in the Constitution. One is the executive order, which is a presidential order that has the force of law, but does not require congressional approval. So say you wanted to raise the minimum wage to $15 for all federal employees and people who work for contractors within the federal government, you could do that under a executive order. Okay, an executive agreement. All right, this is an agreement with another country. This is saying, hey, let's be trade partners. Hey, let's have an alliance. This does not have to go through the Senate for approval. So executive agreement kind of bypasses the treaty, okay, meaning that the Senate doesn't have a say. Same thing as the executive order kind of bypasses Congress. All right, and then there's also a signing statement, which is basically issued that part of the law will not be enforced. Because remember, the president does get the power to enforce the law. So there might be something he's like, hey, I like all this stuff, but I don't think so about this. All right. So let's look at leadership. Okay. So they are the chief legislature, the president. Okay. They have the power to veto, which is send back a bill for whatever reasons. This can, of course, be overridden by 2/3 majority of Congress. They can pocket veto, which means that you let a bill die by not signing it within 10 days of when Congress is going to adjourn. Okay. They can also line item veto, but not really anymore. This was the ability to veto parts of a bill. Some state governors still have it, but the president either vetoes all of the bill or passes all of the bill. This was done once. There was a Supreme Court case about it, and it was then removed from the power of the president. So you cannot line item a veto. So let's look at signing statements. This is a statement, basically a written message, right, issued by the president signing a bill into law that states their objectives to some of the provisions, right? They're like, hey, I kind of like all of this stuff, but these little parts, I don't agree with it, so it's just not going to happen. They're not provided for in the Constitution, okay? And really, they kind of boomed with George W. Bush, okay, baby Bush. And then Obama definitely continued that trend, as did Donald Trump. Okay, so let's look at presidential mandates, right? These give the perception that the voters strongly support the president's leadership and policies. Okay, so the president kind of just does things, right? Makes it easier for presidents to get their policies passed, because if people and the trend shows that they support the president, then the president can kind of push that and puts Congress in a position to work with the president more. All right. So with that comes public support. Public support, huge influence on the president, right? President's appearances are staged, right, to get public's attention. There's no sometimes there's whimsical little stops, but very rarely, because there's a lot of security involved, so everything's staged. So as head of state, the president often performs lots of ceremonial functions, right? Which result in favorable press coverage and everybody saying, oh, our president is great because look at what they're doing. So then that's what gets us our approval ratings, okay? So this is just looking through 2006. We'll look at more current data in class, but to show that, right, there's certain times when your approval rating spikes, and then there's times when it drops. And so it kind of sometimes depends on events going on or things that the president went and did. Okay. Power of the president has expanded over time. It's also been pulled back at times, sort of depends. So the Great Depression, all right, power of the president grew under FDR. All right, world wars, definitely, power of the president grew. Okay, and the global influence has also pushed the power of the president to grow. Some of it is pulled back by Congress at times, but still there's a lot of power within the executive branch there. Okay, so the president and Congress. There's a lot of bargaining. There's a lot of appeals, right? There's a lot of consulting that has to take place here. That's why the State of the Union is really important, because it sets up the priorities that the president has and the hopes that Congress is going to kind of attack and take on some of those and really push them through. In order to rally public support, this is when the president uses the bully pulpit, right? The idea that you're using your specific position, okay, and your ability to speak to the issues and the people to try to get the people to support you and call into Congress and say, hey, you should really do this, or just to sway enough of the polling numbers for Congress to show that maybe they should take it on. All right. They're also the chief diplomat. This means that they negotiate treaties with other countries. Remember, treaties have to be signed by the Senate, so maybe they just do an executive agreement, okay? Taking care of just routine matters, all right, within other countries. So they can negotiate for peace between other countries. There's a lot of different things that can be done here as a chief diplomat. But remember, treaties versus executive agreements. Also, commander-in-chief, right? They make important military decisions, all right? They command a standing military and nuclear arsenal. There's somebody on their staff in the Secret Service, well, not Secret Service, but in the military that follows the president that always carries what's called the football, which is the suitcase with basically the codes to launch the nuclear weapons and set everything in action. So they're always on that path. They can deploy troops without congressional consent, but remember, only for 60 days, right? Okay. All right, the War Powers Resolution, right? This is given the 60 days. The idea is that the Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. It's one of their powers, right? But the president can commit troops, all right, to certain conflicts, okay? After that certain amount of time, the president does have to go to Congress, all right? And talk to them and appeal to them. It expected that the president will go to Congress before sending troops anywhere, or at least notify the appropriate committee members. So presidents ignore this, though, frequently, and the Supreme Court kind of ignores anything that brings this up. So the idea overall is that to declare wars on Congress, the president can kind of send troops where they want for 60 days, and after that, there's a problem. Okay, so national security policy, right? They are kind of the crisis manager. Okay, they can act fast, a lot faster than Congress to resolve a crisis. Okay, but they do have to work with Congress, which means that as the leader of foreign affairs, right, they do work with Congress to support certain bills and funding for foreign policies. Okay, so national security policy. All right, president and the press. Well, yeah. Presidents and media are often adversaries, okay? They're never BFFs. They're frequently at odds, all right? A lot of people in the White House deal with the media in a normal executive branch in White House, but the press secretary typically is the main contact person. So all media really goes through the press secretary first. Press secretary would then assign in a typical functioning White House who's going to serve as the person to be interviewed for whatever maybe the person from the media is wanting. So they're kind of the hub for that. Okay. Media is typically interested in the person of the office, not always the policies. I would argue maybe that's changed today. We're definitely interested in the policies. News coverage has become more negative of the president's. And I'll just leave that one there for you to take with as you want. Yeah. Okay, so let's just update your notes. Make sure you understand the story that's at the beginning of this, right? Of this chapter. Answer your questions in your note taker, and yeah, be ready for class. So until next time, guys.